Today I'm going to talk about a couple things, specifically in the context of exercise variation, but before we get into all that, we need to define what a stimulus is. So, a stimulus is simply the cause, or in this context, the stress to the organism that forces the adaptation. Part of the reason why gains come so easily when you're new to training is because the stimulus is novel. You don't have any adaptation to it. So besides the objective difficulty of the thing, its magnitude of effect is enhanced by the novelty. Then over time, because you become accustomed to the stress, you adapt. You need to find new ways to increase the stress to continue to drive that adaptive response. More weight, more sets, more reps, different exercises. Now, before we move on, I want to debunk this whole muscle confusion nonsense. Your muscles don't get confused. When you switch exercises, you're just reintroducing a novel stimulus. So, let's call this what it is, which is exercise variation. So now that we're on the same page with what we're talking about, how often do we need to vary our exercises to continue to retain a novel stimulus? Because if we just keep doing the same activity over and over again, we'll continually get worse at it. Well, there's a couple schools of thought regarding this topic, the least sophisticated of which is the quote-unquote muscle confusion idea, where you just switch exercises every time. That's a terrible idea for a couple of reasons. But the easiest way to explain it is like, that is equivalent to you have to clean your house, right? So you wash one dish, sweep a little piece of the floor, wash a few things of laundry, and take out a few pieces of garbage. Well, the house is still a mess. In aggregate, you did almost nothing. A better approach, a more sophisticated approach, would be to have a candidacy list of exercises that generally do the same thing that you can rotate through when one begins to become stale. So take pressing, for instance. You could do barbell bench for 3 weeks and then switch to flat dumbbell press and then switch to a machine press and then rotate back to barbell bench. So you have 3 different exercises that ostensibly do the same thing, but in a slightly different manner. Same thing, meaning we are transducing force through roughly the same muscles, just with slightly different force curves, slightly different applications. And I've talked about that on previous videos, and I think most people, once they've been training for a little while, tend to, almost by default, come to that conclusion. Due to limb lengths and, individual leverages and just personal preference, like some things you feel better than other things, we just kind of figure out for ourselves over time, like, okay, I like these couple exercises to press. I like to do these vertical pulls and these horizontal pulls and these things for my legs and these things for my whatever. What I want to introduce you to in this video is an even further sophistication of the candidacy list concept, and that is variation within the same exercise. So if you follow this channel, you know that I do toes to bar pretty much every day. What you may not have noticed, but I urge you to go back and look at the thumbnail, is that in order to not strain the same tissues in my shoulder all the time, what I actually do is every day or every couple of days, I make a slight variation in the width of my grip as I'm hanging. So, as I mentioned just now, first of all, what that does is that alters the specificity of the stress on my shoulders, triceps, lats, and chest, and it also affects the degree of secondary involvement of the supporting torso musculature, like my intercostals and anterior serratus and things of that nature. Another example of within exercise slight variations would be adjusting your foot position when you're squatting, toeing out a little bit more, toeing in a little bit more, going a little wider, going a little narrower. The difference between high and low bar positions on back squats, one having more of a quadricep bias, whereas the other one having more of a posterior chain bias. With pressing, increasing or decreasing your width by as little as a finger can completely change the bias of that exercise. So where's the value in all this? Why are we talking about this? Well, because you might only have a couple exercises that you like doing or you can do. Or maybe you have an exercise that works super well for you, but you don't want to overwork those same tissues all the time, like as is the case with me and toes to bar. Or maybe your equipment is limited. You only have a bench, a squat rack, and a barbell, for instance. And so you need to figure out how to turn old exercises into new exercises. And that's really the genesis of this whole concept. Back in the day, a lot of people only had benches, bars, and squat racks. And so after a while, there was no choice but to just see how many different things you could do with as little equipment as possible. So can you switch exercises all the time? You can. If it's not damaging you and it's still working, there's really no reason. As for muscle confusion, throw that concept just right out. What you might need if your training is getting stale is some variation, and something as subtle as a slight change in your grip can turn old exercises into new exercises. Thanks for watching.